This is the Page Publishing Book Club, and I'm your host, Alice Stockton Rossini. Rob Barretts is my engineer, and we're going to get right to it tonight. Zelda Louise is 23 years old. She's a John Steinbeck fan, and if she's sure of nothing else, she knows she is a creative force. She's published her first collection of poems entitled Abandoned Buildings, and this creative fire was lit with music, right, Zelda?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I was homeschooled growing up, and so, there really weren't a lot of, options or outlets for me to express that creativity. So I asked my mom to buy me a violin off of eBay when I was 8. And she was like, "You can't even play the piano. Why do you think you're going to be able to play the violin?" And I was like, "Just buy me the violin and I'll show you." So she bought me this $50 violin, and I taught myself how to play it in a week. And so that was kind of like the starting point of my obsession with music, my obsession with art, my obsession with writing. So, yeah, I would call myself a very artistic and creative person.
You talk about this being an abstract experiment that took a young girl through all of the phases that young girls go through. Is this your journey?
It is mostly my journey, but it's also borrowed a little bit from the journeys of other young women that I know. So publishing this was very cathartic for me. I've always wanted to get a book published, but publishing this collection in particular was kind of a healing process for me, kind of putting all of the things that I talk about to rest, forgiving them, forgiving myself, and just kind of allowing myself to move on. But my hope with this is that someone somewhere will read it and identify with it, and identify with the things that are talked about, and identify with the struggles that the collection talks about. That's really all I'm looking for, is just someone to read it and say, "Hey, I feel that, I understand that, I'm going through that, or I have gone through that." The story is a young girl who grew up in an extremely abusive home and found something that helped her through it. She found writing, and she used that to kind of coach her through all of her struggles, to coach her through everything she was facing. And at the end of it, she emerged this very strong, self-actualized woman who understands who she is, understands where she's been, and is looking forward to where she's going.
What are you doing to get to young women, and how do you get to them?
So I was actually working at a small metaphysical shop, and I did a book signing with them because the owner was gracious enough to allow me to present my work there. But if other young women have published something and are looking to get it out there, just showing up at small local businesses and saying, "Hey, I did this thing. I live in the area. Could we maybe figure out a time and day that I could do this, and we can figure out a way that this will benefit you as well." That's something that I've used that has worked pretty well.
That is such great advice, Zelda. I hope everybody's taking notes. Thanks so much. Teresa Ryan lives on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. She believes she could make things disappear. And she does in her first published book entitled Love That Never Dies. Now, you were inspired in an interesting way, right, Teresa?
Well, I was walking across the street one day years ago, and a stranger said to me, "This poor man, he lives in this building. He suddenly went blind." And I thought that's a very interesting story to write, And then I heard about the plane that went down, and they thought the pilot may have had psychic blindness. I was thinking, this psychic blindness, and I know it's a condition that occurs only in 1 in 2 billion people, but that's what gave me the idea to write it. It's a paranormal romance about the nobleman who has a rare, incurable condition which he developed following the sudden death of his wife. The heroine, Fiona Morgan, seeks refuge in a castle in Ireland, and she meets Lord Bonprog, but she wants to escape the wily politician, and she has an apparition when she sleeps in the castle that night that her grandmother came, and she told her to leave Ireland. It was an unlucky country for her, and that she should go to England where she would meet fame, fortune, and true love. And she goes there, but she really wants to become an opera singer. And she has a father who dies, and he leaves her a considerable fortune. And then she gets a letter from a lawyer in Ireland, and she is told that she has a sister whom she doesn't know, but she didn't know her mother either, you see. She had 6 wives, and they were all showgirls, and, you know, he was a bit of a playboy.
So Fiona ends up at this castle, and she makes a connection with this guy.
Yes, and she tells him that maybe by helping others, he could cure himself. And he said nonsense. He had been to all kinds of specialists and stuff like this, and nobody could help him. So he's a member of Parliament in England, and he helps the less fortunate there. And then there was gossip about him, a scandal, that his ex-mistress had committed suicide on the day of his wedding, which didn't do anything for his reputation. And Fiona isn't very interested in him anymore. She is interested, but she's very wary. So he regains his sight. The main thing is about the psychic blindness, visual agnosia. He regains his sight when he rescues Fiona from a rape by the wily politician that she was trying to escape from when she met him in the castle in Ireland.
It sounds like you know a lot about castles, and
I'm Irish, but I've lived in England too.
so it sounds like you kind of have a fascination with
The paranormal.
Yeah.
Things can be cured, even though they seem quite impossible. And by doing good, you can cure yourself of the most awful illness.
What a great message.
Thank you.
What's with the paranormal?
Well, I belong to a spiritual and ethical society once, and I believe in making, you can make people disappear and stuff like that.
You believe you can make people disappear?
Yes, and I have it in my book, actually, because the energy, say, from an amulet or a ring can exert its influence on you.
Did you ever see that happen?
I actually didn't, but it can happen.
I'd like to believe that, Teresa. I don't know. You got me on that one. Maureen Lynch started a book called Falling Angel before 9/11, and she says a voice told her to finish it. She says she was born with a veil over her face, which some believe is a sign of psychic abilities and special destiny. Maureen.
I can remember my mom saying when I was born, you had a veil over your face, and I never knew what that was. I thought that was an honor or a queen or something. And I look up today, it means a child of a gifted star. So it's so ironic because, Alice, when my book came out, I felt it. In the middle of the night, I felt it. Because when I was born, my parents said I was born very, very ill. They gave me 48 hours to live. And they named me after the priest, because let's name it after the feisty Maureen O'Hara. And when the book was released, I said to my husband, I don't know, I got a feeling this book's out. He goes, well, let's look. And there it was. And guess whose book was next to me? If you look it up, Maureen O'Hara.
What?
Yeah, Maureen O'Hara. The story's about just over the years of growing up and the torment, how nobody would believe me. And since 9/11, I hold all those victims in my heart. See, I start to cry when I talk about it. When I met my husband, he had a limousine service. One of the drivers could not cover, so he goes, Maureen, would you like to go on a small date with me? I got to drop the clients off. I said, sure, John, no problem. And as we dropped his clients off, we drove by, and I said, stop. I see something by these doors. And he goes, well, you're looking at, right? I said, no, that's the towers. I said, oh. And I said, gee, wouldn't it be a shame if planes hit that tower? And he said, why would you say that? I said, because in 2 weeks, these towers are going to come down. We have to warn them. And he goes, all right, you got to tell me, what are you hiding? And I told him all about who I was, what I become. Do you still love me? Do you still want to marry me? He goes, the thought remains. And as I was writing this book, JJ came to me. please, 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 angel lady, please, tell them I love them, please. I think this man, JJ, was a man in the corridor coming downstairs as a firefighter. Then I had a spirit come to me, very angry. Why didn't you tell them? And I'm screaming at this person saying, they wouldn't believe me. And he goes, I'm Jimmy. They would have believed you. No, they wouldn't, Jimmy. They wouldn't. And he went to the light. I see the dead. I can't walk in funeral parlors because I can see what they're saying. And I truly believe now that I came in and out of my body several times. I'd wake John up and say, John, I traveled again. He goes, oh, no, my God. And there's nothing totally wrong with me. It just happens. And I can see myself from up on the ceiling looking down at me and John sleeping. But at that time, Alice, you have no stress, no anxiety of how you're going to get back. It's just wow, this is neat. And then you look around. There's just pink light all around you. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. Maybe I can help somebody out there. I am clean from 25 years from cocaine and drinking.
Okay.
Due to my spiritual angels and Jesus. I have angel guides. And angel guides warn me, what's going to happen today. So they told me today when I woke up this morning, everything's going to be okay. And I got a good feeling over me. And I can vision things. And I saw me on television shows. Way before this book came out, I saw people coming to me, flocking to me, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I don't like being called a medium. I don't like being called a psychic. My clients call me an angel.
What do you do? What kind of counseling do you do? Spiritual counseling?
I do spiritual counseling. The point of my book is I want them to know that I am the real one. I am. Message from God. I am. Since 5 years old, I was locked up in institutions on Thorazine Shuffle because my parents did not believe me. And having this book out now, it brings me tears, Alice, because it does. It lets me be me now, free. And I don't charge people a lot. They're like, oh my God, why are you so cheap? And I make jewelry. And I give them as gifts. I'm sorry.
It's okay, Maureen. I'm just really happy that you've been able to do this and that you've been able to share your story with me, because it is some story.
Love and light to you, and I thank Page Publishing for everything. And I look forward to more books.
Me too, Maureen. Tito Abao believes he's learned the secret of life, why we're here, how we got here, who we really are. The name of his book is The Monograph of the Parallel Life of Tito Abao and Nero. Okay, you believe you're a reincarnation of Nero. How do you know that?
It's a story that takes place over about 30 or 40 years through various spiritual disciplines that I was involved in, but it just kept coming up, this connection to Nero.
When did you first discover this?
I was probably around 45 or 50.
Between 45 and 50.
Right. It started out with my wanting to go into it was biofeedback work.
Okay.
And there was an alternative practitioner in San Francisco. And one day, I had this weird thing where I threw my hand up in a Roman salute, Hail Caesar type thing. And we were both astonished about it, because where the hell did that come from?
Right.
And that's where it all started. And I stumbled upon this book called Journey Out of the Body by Robert Monroe. And I went to Faber, Virginia, to participate, because I was into, spiritual stuff, astral travel and all that stuff, because I've been out of body and all that. So it popped out again. And now I had to deal with it a little bit more, because in the book I describe how, as I got into all the astral stuff, it upset everybody around me. And the whole point of this particular type of seminar is that you unload stuff. But what really happens when you get into these things, your whole life starts to unravel, and you begin to see into all the various realities that are actually there, but because of the way the third dimensional reality is put together, you're not theoretically supposed to be popping into that kind of stuff. So this whole book was the unfoldment of this whole thing, and then I began to really find out all kinds of stuff about my past lives, because it goes back 7,000 years.
Do you believe we all have past lives?
See, the thing that I'm trying to explain to people is that if you discover that you had an identity, then you know that you never died, and that there is no such thing as actual death. The only thing that happens is you transition out of one identity into another identity. And this book is a template for your life, or anybody's life, because your life, see, I had a grand finale. And everybody has this grand finale because what happens is there's these between life agreements that you get into before you come into an incarnation. And nothing actually can happen to you that you don't agree to, because the whole setup is kind of like Shakespeare said, all the world is a stage and we're all actors upon it. In other words, we're all in this lifetime, or any lifetime, actually giving an Oscar-winning performance. Because the truth is, you're living stories. None of this is real. It's a holographic projection, and it's based on a matrix of consent. A Googleplexes of individuals with different viewpoints agree to play a game, and that's how this all works. And that's what I learned over those some like 50 years of going through all this regression therapy, Monroe Institute, astral travel stuff. I just learned everything about myself. And you actually, as an individual, know all this stuff, and you're volunteering, and or you're entering an agreement in what I call a matrix complex.
All right, Tito, it's all very interesting. I'll give you that. And you know what? Who knows? We have to take a very quick break, but we're coming right back, so don't go anywhere. This is the Page Publishing Book Club.
Attention all authors. Page Publishing is looking for authors. Have you written a book and want to get it published? Page Publishing will get your book into bookstores and for sale online at Amazon, Apple iTunes, and other outlets. They handle all aspects of the publishing process for you: printing, cover art, publicity, copyright, and editing. Call 800-204-6099 now for your free author submission kit. That's 800-204-6099 for your free author submission kit.
Welcome back to the Page Publishing Book Club. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini, and welcome back Polly Lipson, a PBBC regular if there ever was one, ever since her mom passed away, and she found a treasure trove of writings, poems, love stories, enough to fill several books, and Silhouette's Literary Passageways is her latest. Welcome back, Polly. Is this your third visit with us?
It is.
Congratulations. Yes. I wish I had a prize for you.
As you recall, the other book that we just did, Songs of You, a postscript, I had found those writings. Once I found those, I said to myself, I remember a box of writing that my mother had always kept to herself. That box had subsequently disappeared, and I never really thought about it until that moment when I had discovered the other box. And I said to myself, you know, that box must have something in it. So I searched the house, and I found the box, and it was put together with all these old rubber bands, and it was overflowing with papers. And I took it apart, and I was like chomping at the bit to get into it. And I found all these poetic essays that she had written about all these books that she had read throughout her lifetime. And they were really like silhouettes of these books that she had read. And they would like lead you into the book itself, but they were written in a poetic form. And there are about 15 books, but she also did a whole section on poetry, which I couldn't believe. And some of these books and some of these poets I never heard of, and I had to look them up to see who they were and what they were. So I put everything together, and it's a magnificent book of these poetic dissertations on all these books that she read.
Are these books we would know?
Some of them you would. For instance, I remember she wrote, it was called Lovers in Milton and Shakespeare. One a sonnet, one a play. And it was about Antony and Cleopatra and Samson and Delilah. And she compared them. And then she did one about Pip and Estella in Charles Dickens. She wrote about Romeo and Juliet, Hamlet. Oh, she did a fabulous one on Sidney Carton and Billy Budd. Sidney Carton was the main character in A Tale of Two Cities.
Oh, right. That's right.
Right. And she compared Billy Budd and Sidney Carton. Who would ever think of that?
Right.
Also, she wrote about a contemporary author, Bernard Malamud, and his book, A New Life.
Okay.
She wrote, which I never heard of, Yasunori Kawabata. He was a very famous Japanese author. I think he won the Nobel Prize for Literature. And she wrote on The House of the Sleeping Beauties, which was absolutely magnificent. And I went out and I subsequently bought that book.
Well, she did a great service to all of these
Yes,
authors,
she did.
you know?
And, I'm hoping maybe I can interest like the colleges or some of these school districts in this book, because it's a wonderful introduction into literature that I think the children would really appreciate. She even did something on the book of Job from the Bible. And then at the end, I put a biography that she wrote of our family. We were always together and what a wonderful relationship we had. And then I also included 3 of the letters that she received from the principal of her school, Richmond Hill High School, in 1935, saying how fabulous she was in English composition. And she was one of the 3 top students in English composition out of a school of over 4,000 children. And she received all these awards. And that was really like inklings of her success. It was foreshadowing what she was to become, because she really was a writer and she really didn't know it. That was so sad.
Right.
I wanted her to know it, and this is why I'm so passionate about all her writing and why I want everyone to know about it, because she really deserved it, and she had something special. And I created all these books, and then another 2 books are coming.
And she's looking down on you, Polly, and she's saying,
Yes.
I got more where that came from. I'm just waiting next time I talk to you to find out what other box you found.
Oh, well, I did. I found 2 more. I'll tell you about that when those books come out.
All right, Polly. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
All right. Finally, a doctor of education, Beverly Klug, suffered a traumatic brain injury, and not only has she recovered, it's led her down a path she would have never imagined. The name of her book is Riding on the Sun, Surviving and Thriving with Traumatic Brain Injury, TBI. And Beverly, you were in a terrible accident.
Because the seatbelt held me in, thank goodness. Otherwise, I would have flown out the windshield. But what happened with that is the left side of my head hit the door frame. And with that impact, that caused TBI. And there were so many different things that I couldn't do as a result of this injury. And as more and more things were affected in terms of my speech and my ability to do mathematics, and it just became a living nightmare for several years. And with teaching at a university, I needed to be at the top of my game. And thank goodness, we had a physical medicine doctor who had been brought to our community, as well as a neuropsychologist. And at that time, those 2 professions were just brand new. And my neurologist referred me to the physical medicine doctor, who then referred me to Dr. Courgette, who is one of the co-authors on the book. And they could explain what was going on, whereas people who are, regular psychologists, many times they haven't been trained in how to work with people who have had a brain injury the way that mine did. And one of the things that I learned, many people still have never heard of a neuropsychologist and don't understand that there is a need to have somebody who is evaluating you, who understands the brain and what a traumatic brain injury can do and how it can affect your brain and your life. And one of the common responses with a TBI is also depression. And one of the things that we know is that over 50,000 individuals in this country alone that suicided every year because of a TBI, because they didn't know what was going on. They didn't know if they were going crazy. That's your first response, because you can't do the things that you're used to doing.
Right.
You know, it's like, as I said, your whole life is turning upside down. And you just don't understand. You know, for instance, I couldn't understand why I would start everything backwards. So when I went to wash the dishes, I ended up drying the dishes that were still dirty. I was talking backwards. You don't know why you're doing it. You don't remember that you've done it, which is also really scary when you don't remember that you've done things. And one of the things that I have found is humor makes a huge difference, because then people can laugh with you, and it also helps you accept the fact that, okay, I'm not the way I was before. I was such a perfectionist before, and I've learned it's okay not to be a perfectionist, but that was very, very difficult for me to accept. I retired 3 years ago, and I've been tutoring other people who have problems with literacy, and I just let them know that, this is what happened to me, and if you're having problems with the way that, with reading backwards or, your perceptual abilities, we can work around this. We can learn again.
Oh, man, that is so great, Beverly. Something good came out of all of this after all. Thanks so much. And something good came out of this whole show, don't you think, Rob? We learned how people disappear and voices talking to people, and maybe we're all reincarnated. I mean, where else are you going to find all of that in a half hour? We got to go. Thanks so much for being with us. See you next time on the Page Publishing Book Club.